All stand, please. Please be seated.
Your Honour, before Mr Reid calls his next witness, can I just deal briefly with two matters? Firstly, Your Honour will recall I took Ms Barrett to document 65 in the court book, which was the guidelines for vegetation burning. I forgot to tender those, and I formally tender them. And then the second matter is to report back on the progress of Mr Hall's homework, the maps. Could Mr Temponi please bring up document 151? And just to explain, Your Honour, what this is, I'm about to tender this. Your Honour will recall Mr Reid asked Mr Hall to go back to the location of the track off Gangels Road and mark on a map the location where Mr Hall had seen the fire that he had referred to in his evidence. What Your Honour sees at the bottom of page 0495 and onto the top of 0496 is Mr Hall's email to my learned friend's instructor. And then if we could go down the email chain, please. And then if Mr Temponi could rotate that one 180 degrees. Now, Your Honour, I'm mischievously tempted to offer you the hard copy of this map, but I think both parties are content that this is an accurate photograph. And the hard copy is present in court, but what Mr Hall appears to have done is take a photograph of the large hard copy map. And could I draw Your Honour's attention to the top of the map? Your Honour sees just next to the first crease there's a little black dot. If Mr Temponi could zoom in for us there. And if he could put the cursor up on the dot, please, so Your Honour sees that. And then if we could zoom out again, please, Mr Temponi, and go further down the email chain. The next image, Your Honour, is a close-up photograph. And so Your Honour can see where Mr Hall has indicated as the spot where he saw the fire that he gave the evidence about. And then I think there's 2 or 3 photographs which are just photographs of the track, a rather fetching photograph of some trees, and a car bonnet with more trees.
So could we just go back to the enlarged section of the map, please? Oh, he's marked with an X. I just didn't pick that up.
Yes, it's just a closer up photograph of the same X, Your Honour.
And he thinks that the digits in the first 3 numbers of the grid reference were transposed, or 2 of them were transposed.
Yes, I think that's the text of his email.
Yes, Your Honour.
So, Your Honour, I tender...
Nothing turns on that, obviously, that they were transposed.
Well, we agree that they were transposed.
Yes, but nothing is of consequence for the defendant's case as to that.
Yes, there is.
Oh, is there?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait till I'm told.
Yes.
The effect of the transposition area, Your Honour, is to move the X slightly further to the east than it otherwise would have been. But my learned friend will no doubt make submissions about that in due course. So, Your Honour, I tender document 151, and there are no further questions from us in respect of Mr Hall, nor are there any from a learned friend. And so, if I could ask Your Honour formally to excuse Mr Hall, and with that step taken, I'm reminded as well, Your Honour, that the parties have reached an agreement about quantum, and there's some wording that's likewise been prepared for that. And so, given that we've also resolved the quantum issue, I can formally close the plaintiff's case.
Okay, well then I'll relieve Mr Hall, and I shall henceforth regard the plaintiff's case as unconditionally closed.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Yes, the tender of 151, Your Honour, it's probably being pedantic, but the first 2 pages of it I don't understand my learned friend to be tender because stroll
The-
up
The,
the beginnings of the email
Yes.
chain. So
no,
um,
save and accept.
yes, from starts at if we can at 495, 496. Oh, in fact, no, we've got to have the first page.
I think you might.
Yes,
need
we
that.
do. So nothing. I shouldn't have risen.
No, well, I'll regard you as undug. All right, thanks, Mr. Reid.
Yes, I call Peter Sutcliffe.
Yes, come on through, Mr. Sutcliffe. The witness box is just across there. If you just remain standing for a moment, you'll be asked if you would like to take an oath or make an affirmation.
Will you choose to make an affirmation or an oath?
Oh, thanks.
Yes. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Please say I swear.
I swear. Yes, thanks, Mr. Reid.
Thank you. Mr. Sutcliffe, would you like a glass of water before we start, or you're okay? Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're Peter Sutcliffe,
Yes,
and you live at 42 Inala Road, Fawcett,
yes,
and you're a builder.
yes.
Do you remember the day of the Fawcett Dunalley bushfires, the 3rd of January 13?
Yes, fairly well.
Yep. And you were driving home over the causeway leading to Sorrel,
Yes.
and what did you see?
Coming home, I was on sickness leave at the time and I was doing short days. And coming across causeways, I saw smoke.
Right. Thank you. Now, when you got home, when you got to Inala Road, did you go home or did you drive to the end of Inala Road?
I went straight to the end of Dunalley Road.
Right. And what did you then do?
I parked at the end of Dunalley Road, on the left at the end of Dunalley Road, and I knew the bloke that owned the property. I walked across his property, stood at the back of the fire and had a look at see what was going on with it.
Right. Could the witness please be shown document 126, Bates 0647? And can we enlarge that, please, and take a screenshot of it, but not the witness locations. We could leave them out. Thank you. Right. Now, do you see in that photograph, you recognise that to be an aerial photograph of Inala Road?
Yes.
Whereabouts do you live by reference to that photograph? Are you in the photograph or have we snipped it off too early?
Having trouble finding it, yeah.
Right. It's to the south of the photograph. Closer to Arthur Highway.
My friend
Or
can
not.
lead you on if it's...
Yeah, well, I probably was.
Oh yeah, I can see now where I am, yeah.
Yes. Now, if you look opposite you, you'll see a young gentleman hiding behind a screen. You see opposite you there? That's Mr.
Yes.
Tempone. He's got a cursor that he's going to I'll get him to put it near the words Inala Road. So, you see the cursor running across now in the photograph?
Yes.
Now, can you tell Mr. Tempone to move that up, down, to the left or to the right until we get to your place?
Come in, just keep going up Dunalley Road. No, to your right, up Dunalley Road. Can you hold it there for a sec? Go back please. Keep going back. kept going back, sorry. That's the start of my driveway there to the right.
Right. Can we just put an X there, please?
That's the start of the driveway.
Right. And you live to the southeast of that driveway?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, you then gave evidence that you took your car to the end of Inala Road. Can you, if Mr Tempone keeps running that cursor up Inala Road, can you tell him to stop where you... he's in your car driving at the moment. Tell him to stop where you stopped, will you?
No, go back. There. That's
Right.
roughly where I stopped.
Okay.
It's the end of the road.
Put an A there, please. Thank you. And then, can you just repeat where you went after that? Well, no, you've given that evidence, and if we can get Mr Tempone to move his cursor in the direction that you then walked.
Where the cursor is now, if you go straight up the page, to the left of that driveway, I walk straight across that paddock, across that cleared paddock. No, round to your right, straight ahead. Yeah, just keep going straight up that track. And then I turned to your right, roughly there, and started walking through the bush.
Right, well now, if we just stop there for a moment. Mr Tempone, can you draw, please, where you've just been with the cursor?
I think
I can't be
I
exact.
think Mr Sutcliffe was indicating more that he walked across the cleared paddock rather than up the track.
Yes, Mr Sutcliffe, how's that looking compared to where you you recall?
I can't be exact where that is because it's too small to see. But I walked through, it was all clear paddock to the end, and then looked down to the right. So I was on the tree line when I was looking down through.
Right, okay.
I'm not 100% sure whether I was right there or at the end of the second paddock there on the left, because it's too small to see.
When you refer to the second paddock, that's
In front of the cursor.
yes. Can we enlarge that screenshot, Mr Tempone, or have I... Just go a little bit, well, let's get a new screenshot then. If we erase that track, yes, thank you. And mark that and I tender it. Is that a bit more,
Just we'll take a new screenshot.
yes. Now if we can enlarge that. Right, and then perhaps a screenshot of, do we need, it's gone back again.
It's clear enough to see for what I wanted.
Okay, right. So you've mentioned two cleared paddocks.
Yes.
Well, let's go back to where that A was marked, where your car was,
Yes.
and direct Mr Tempone, if you could please, Mr Sutcliffe, as to where you walked.
If you go straight up the page, there's a little track there. Go to the end of that track. Keep going straight up that track, and then down to your right through there. Now, no, not quite right ahead, but to the right. Go straight ahead. Down. It would have been through there in that direction. Not 100% sure exactly where I was standing there.
Right. Okay. Well, if we put a B there, where the cursor is, and then if we run a line from where B is, with that right-hand bend that was described, and then back down the track. or back, bring it up the track if you like, Mr. Tempano, whichever's easiest.
It's very hard.
Well, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect,
No.
but as to the direction you walk, but you're fairly happy with the spot B?
No, Your Honour, that bush line there is really light bush and you can walk under it all. And I'm not 100% sure, but I was in quite, where I was standing, it was open enough to see down to the next door neighbour.
So you might have gone in a bit further.
I would say so, Your Honour. I was in there a little bit further.
Sorry, Your Honour. Does the witness want me to remark?
Mr. Reid?
Yes, yes, I thought you were at the razor. Yeah, now, can you direct Mr. Tempano to put the B, so just to ask for the cursor to go in, you said a bit further?
There's a water hole to the right,
Yes.
and there's an 11 in front.
Yep.
About halfway between the two I was,
Right,
in the bush there, about there.
about there, so we'll put the B there.
But on the southern side of the waterhole?
I'd say western side of it.
Western side.
West or northwest side. I'm not
Okay.
sure of the directions exactly there.
Yep.
Right, I attend to that. Now, Mr. Sutcliffe, we've got you in the bush now.
Yes.
What did you see?
There was fire, a lot of smoke, and the smoke was that thick you couldn't really see exactly where it started, so sort of walked up as close as I was going up to the fire and walked down towards the southeast side of it and was looking from what direction it was coming and where it was going to.
Right. So when you got in there, in what direction, if we use, you're familiar with the house at 112, the Lawrence house?
Yes, I know where it is, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Were you looking in that direction or away from that?
I was looking from the tree lines directly towards that house.
Right. And you saw fire between you and the house?
There's a fence line on that property. I
Yes.
saw the fire was burning from that fence line up towards the bush, burning uphill into the bush,
Right. And when you say uphill,
towards Fawcett from that house.
right, thank you. Can you mark, can we, I think we can stay with this exhibit, Mr. Tempano. Now, can you, using the cursor, indicate, you might need to put, it might not be one spot, you might need to put some lines, but where did you see the fire burning from and to?
From the two stars, I'm still trying to pick up exactly where I am on the map.
Right, well,
Yeah, well,
can
perhaps
you,
we didn't make that clear that the
No.
9
No.
and the 6, it's common ground that the 9 and the 6 is covering Mr. Darren Lawrence's
Yes.
buildings.
yes,
Well, it was between the 9 and the 6 and the 11, the
yep,
fire was, but it was coming from the back fence, from the clearing of Lawrence's house into the trees,
so,
directly behind his house.
right,
But it was burning on the Fawcett side,
yes,
and it was in the bush line burning uphill towards Fawcett.
right.
So it's slightly uphill from his house up that hill.
Right. Can we start with the cursor? You can see Mr. Darren Lawrence's shed just underneath the 6 and the 9, those stars.
Yep.
Right. And by reference to that, can you move the cursor to that, please? Move the cursor down to the shed, please, Mr. Tempano. Right. So it was in that area.
It was
and-
directly behind that shed,
Right.
between there and the 11.
Yes. So
And
move it out a bit towards the 11, please. Yeah.
it would have been, at a guess, I would say it probably would have been 4 to 5 times wider than that shed, the fire going up towards the 11, maybe 7 or 8 times wider.
So when you say
So-
up, the direction of the fire was towards the 11.
Yes.
Right. So if we can just draw an arrow from where you have the cursor at the moment, please. And put an arrowhead on it when we reach the 11. Yep. Does that arrow depict what you've just described?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, how wide was the
Sorry,
fire?
I just need to understand this.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the arrowhead is the direction of the fire?
Yes, Your Honour.
How wide was the fire?
Well, I was standing on the bottom side of it, but I'd estimate it could have been 150 metres by 200 metre front fire.
Right. And how long did you watch it for?
I would have stood there between 20 minutes and half an hour at least.
Right. And then what did you do?
Once I sort of worked out where the fire was heading, where it was going, and to establish whether it was heading towards my house, I walked back right across the track, and as I was walking back across the track, I rang the wife up.
And did you ask her to do something?
Yes, I asked her to ring the fire brigade.
Right. Thank you. Now, did you return to the fire scene later that day with a Kevin Daly?
No, I returned out there by myself,
Yes.
and Kevin Daly, I was just through the gate, started to walk in there, and then Kevin Daly's four-wheel drive turned up afterwards.
I see.
So he did arrive basically the same time as I did.
Right. And you spoke to him?
Yes.
And you knew him?
I went to school with him.
Right. And what did you do with him?
I asked him what we were going to do about the fire.
Hmm?
Sorry, this is before you rang your wife.
No.
No, you walked back in after you rang your wife.
Yes.
Right. So you walked out to get some reception, did you?
I went to the fire the first time, rang the wife, and I went home, and then I went back out to see what was going on.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And you spoke to him about what was going to happen with the fire. And did you take him to any particular place?
We met at the gate, and we were going to go through the gate. I said to him, can we cut the lock and take the four-wheel drive through the paddock up to the fire front? And he said no. And we walked up and had a look at the fire. And that's when he said, no, we'll just let it burn its course, it's fine.
Right. So the fire that you looked at, is that the same fire that you've marked with the arrow?
Yes.
Thank you. Could the witness please be shown document 46 0261? Probably the first page. Yeah, I've already attended the witness act, yeah. Yes. Now, did you make a statement to police in relation to the matters, including the evidence that you've just given? Could we scroll down to the second page, please? And did you give that statement on the 31st of May 2013?
Yes, looks like it.
Yes, thank you. And can we just go to the next page, please? And that's the map that's referred to in that statement. Is that so, Mr. Sutcliffe?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I attend to that.
Thank you. I'll need to scroll through it. I'll have Mr. Tamponi scroll through it slowly enough
Yes.
for me to read, please,
Indeed.
Mr. Reid.
Yes. I'm not tendering those pages.
What are you tendering?
If we move on, please. No, go back up. And that's it, page 0261, 0262 and 0263.
Okay, thank you. Is it common ground? I believe they sold some of this land to their son, who is the current owner. That's a reference to Mr. Darren Lawrence.
Yes, I think, well, that was Darren Lawrence's evidence, I think.
Yes, I just want to make sure in the context of this document, though, because Mr. Sutcliffe says the fire I saw was burning in trees and ferns, was burning on a property which is owned by Chris and Barbara Lawrence. That's all. Just want to make sure that there's no confusion about that. And likewise, that the Lawrence property that's being referred to there is the property of Chris and Barbara Lawrence. Could scroll down, please, Mr. Timpano.
Sorry, could Your Honour just clarify what Your Honour's last comment was?
Yes, of course. If you go back, Mr. Timpano, you see you've got to look at this contextually.
Yes.
Well, you're making me dizzy. My wife Anne had called and said that there was a fire near our property. When I got home, out past my sister's, so on, I found the fire. The fire which I saw was burning in trees and ferns. It was burning on a property which is owned by Chris and Barbara Lawrence. I believe that they sold some of this land to their son, who's the current owner. That differentiates Mr. Darren Lawrence.
Yes.
This property is accessed via Dunalley Road. In respect of the fire on the Lawrence property, I state the following. Just want to understand that that's the property of Chris and Barbara Lawrence. Now, you can cross-examine about that in due course, but don't leave me not understanding that.
I think in context, Your Honour, he's referring to what we know to be the property owned by Darren Lawrence.
Well, maybe, but I'm just saying don't leave me in a state of confusion about that.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Because that's not what the document is saying on a plain reading of it.
Certainly, Your Honour.
You scroll down, Mr. Timpano. Right, just down, please, to the map. Oh, I see we've got a bit more text to go. Okay. Right, down to the map, thanks. All right, thank you. Well, I've read the document.
Yes. No further questions, Your Honour.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Your Honour. Mr. Sutcliffe, the 3rd of January 2013 was a total fire ban day. Do you recall?
No, I don't know.
You don't recall. You recall it was hot?
Yes.
Yeah. And the area in which you live, Dunalley Road and its surrounds, is an area where there's bushland, correct? Yeah. And a fire on a hot day in summer poses quite a risk, doesn't it?
Yes.
And you'd expect, wouldn't you, that if you or neighbours saw smoke or fire in the area, you'd call the Tas Fire Service, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And on this day, perhaps Mr. Sutcliffe's statement could be brought back up again. Scroll back to the first page, and at the top, give you a chance to read the first 4 sentences there, Mr. Sutcliffe.
Yes.
You see there, you say in that statement that your wife called you, that's your wife Anne, and said there was a fire near your property. That's what occurred, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Well, Mr. Sutcliffe, this statement was signed by you as a statutory declaration in May 2013, yes? Correct?
I'd say so, yes.
Yeah, and it's likely to be more accurate than your memory now, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
Yeah, and so I'm suggesting to you that what in fact happened this day was that your wife called you and said there was a fire near your property.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, it doesn't seem right.
Well, Mr. Sutcliffe, your evidence is that you followed this fire around for some 20 or 30 minutes. But that's the case, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. You had a phone with you, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. You had coverage in the area, didn't
Yes.
you? Yep. But you didn't call the TFS, did you?
No.
No, because your wife had. That's the case, isn't it?
No.
But on a day, hot fire day like this, with fire, smoke in the area of Dunalley Road, as I think you said before, you'd expect a call be made to the TFS because a fire in the area would be of grave concern. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So is it your evidence that this fire just simply burnt for 20 or 30 minutes in your presence without you taking any action about it?
Yes, I did.
You did take action about it?
Yes.
So you did call the TFS?
No.
No. But you had your phone with you?
Yes.
Yeah. So why didn't you call them?
I didn't know their number.
Well, 000's a pretty well-known number, isn't it?
You've got to ring the Dodgers Ferry fire brigade.
Come on, Mr. Sutcliffe. There's a fire in bushland, in and around Dunalley Road, at the peak of summer, and you've got a phone in your hand. Are you saying you couldn't get through to 000?
I didn't try.
You didn't try. Can I suggest perhaps the better history is, Mr. Sutcliffe, that was, as he'd said in the statutory declaration, that your wife had called you and let you know of this fire, and she had called the Tas Fire Service. That would make more sense, wouldn't it?
No.
You said before in your evidence that you couldn't really see where it had started, the fire. That's so, isn't it?
Yes, I couldn't see exactly where it started.
No, because you were in under the canopy and you weren't
Yes.
sure where this fire had its origin. That's so, isn't it?
I had to move around to see where it was coming from. Yeah.
You saw smoke, no doubt?
Yes.
Yep. And was that where you're in that position that you marked B on the map before?
I don't know where I'm at.
If that,
Where's the B on the map?
thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Temponi. PS2,
Yes, so it's in that facility there.
you saw smoke.
There was a lot of smoke.
There was a lot of smoke. And fire you saw,
Yes.
but you couldn't discern where it had come from?
Yes, I did.
That's so. And the prevailing wind in that area is from the west, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know. All right. Mr. Sutcliffe, you said you spoke with Kevin Daly, who's a TFS volunteer.
Yes.
You know, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And if I could just bring back your statutory declaration up again, which is just tendered, and scroll down. Stop there. Now you say here, I estimate that the fire front of the fire moved about 15 to 20 metres towards me. It was burning up the hill from the rear of this property in the 30 minutes I watched it. There were very light winds at this time and it was very hot, mid-30s. I could see firefighting activities in around this area and I approached Kevin Daly. Daly is a volunteer firefighter. You see your evidence there.
Yes.
Now, it's the case, isn't it, that when you were making these observations, there was firefighting activity in the area. That's so, isn't it?
That's what it says there. Yes.
Because that's the truth.
No.
Well, this is a statutory declaration that you made. Mr. Sutcliffe, this is a statutory declaration you made in 2013.
I had 2 trips out there. That is what happened on the second trip out there.
Well, I'm
not the
suggesting,
first trip.
well, I'm suggesting to you that you could see firefighting activities from TFS firefighters when you're making these observations.
Which observations on the first occasion?
On the first occasion. When you were watching this fire for 30 minutes,
Yes.
you could see firefighting activities in the area.
No.
Well, I suggest that's what your statement says. Are you saying your statement's wrong about that?
No, I'm not saying anything's wrong or right.
Right. Mr. Sutcliffe, it's some 9 years since the 3rd of January. Would you concede your memory's perhaps far less accurate now than what it was when you did this statutory declaration?
No.
You wouldn't concede that. Well, can I suggest to you that you're simply mistaken about the time at which you made these observations?
No.
I want to suggest to you that you made these observations after you spoke with your wife. Disagree with that?
Which observations?
30-minute observations you made in the bush of this fire.
As I said, I had 2 trips out there. So make yourself clear which one you're asking about, please.
Well, your first statement doesn't indicate that there were 2 trips. Could you read through it and tell me?
I made 2 trips out there. The first trip was when I got the wife to ring up for the fire brigade. Second trip was when I spoke to Kevin Daly.
Well, I'll put it to you that there were no, sorry, take that back. You didn't go on 2 trips, but rather there was 1 trip. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I could disagree.
And I suggest to you that the trip that you made, the singular trip that you made, was after your wife had called you and said there was a fire near your property.
Do you want to answer that?
I want you to answer that.
What's
I'm putting it to you that the single trip that you made was after you spoke with your wife, Anne, and she told you there was fire near the property.
Haven't I already answered that, sir?
Well, I'm asking you, I'm putting it to you.
I'm saying that I would make 2 trips out there. I don't know what you want me to answer. I said 2 trips. The first trip, when I was out there, I got the wife to ring up the fire brigade. The second trip, I was with Kevin Daly.
In his 4-wheel drive fire truck.
We didn't take the 4-wheel drive into the property because he said he wouldn't take it through the gate.
But to an extent, in that
Yes, at the front gate of that property, you know?
Could document 76 please be brought up? And if we could please go over to page 301. Just before I ask you about this, your wife, Anne, she's a good member of the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd agree with that?
Yeah.
And I asked you before about how you'd expect people to call the fire brigade if they saw a fire. You remember that?
Yes.
Yep. And your wife, I'd suggest, is the sort of person that if they saw a fire in the area would call the fire brigade. Do you agree with that? If you could look down the second column, you'll see in that column a number of names. And if we just scroll down about halfway, at 14, 15, 31, do you see that, just where the cursor is?
Yes.
You'll see Sutcliffe Anne. You see that entry?
Yes.
And what I want you to assume, or I want you to assume that this is the timestamp of the call that your wife made to the TFS. So at 2:15, 31, 27 seconds, your wife called the TFS.
Yes.
And you recall in your statutory declaration that it said, or you had said, or declared, that your wife had called you and told you there was smoke near the property. You remember that?
No.
No. In your statutory declaration, you remember, I showed you it before.
No, I can't remember it now.
No. The statutory declaration that I put up said, in your words, that your wife Anne had called you saying that there was smoke near the property. Do you remember seeing that in the statutory declaration?
Sorry. Can you repeat that?
Do you remember reading the statutory declaration before?
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah, because you did it about a minute or so ago, yes?
Yes.
And you remember in it, you said that you had received a call from your wife and she had told you there was a fire near your property. Do you remember that in your statement?
No, I
Statutory
don't.
declaration?
No.
What I'm suggesting to you, Mr. Sutcliffe, is that your wife called at 2:15, the fire brigade, and then called you. That's what I'm suggesting to you. Or called you shortly beforehand. That's what I'm suggesting to you.
No.
All right. That's it, was really. Mr. Sutcliffe, you know Darren Lawrence's property at Dunalley Road?
Yes, I've been out there before.
Yeah. At the western edge of that property, I think, sorry, take that back. You mentioned before there was fire burning near a shed on that property,
Yes.
correct? Did you observe a wood pile in the area of that shed on that property?
No.
No. You didn't see a wood pile in that area burning on that
No.
property?
No.
You didn't see that. All right. Nothing further, Your Honour.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Cox. Mr. Reid?
There's no re-examination and I seek the witness's relief.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Sutcliffe, for your attendance. You're perfectly free to go or free to stay and watch proceedings if you wanted to.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Your Honour, before I call the next witness, time depending, we may call Mr. Jackson, the arborist, this afternoon, and I hadn't previously invited Your Honour to look at his report. It's about, I think it's 8 pages long, so there's not a huge amount in it, but I should warn you. I call Colin Thomas.
You take an oath and choose to make evidence. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say I swear.
I swear.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Thomas. Make yourself comfortable there. There's an unopened bottle of water. Feel the need for a glass of water.
Thank you.
Mr. Reid?
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Thomas, your full name, please?
Colin Stewart Thomas, S-T-U-A-R-T.
Thank you. I'll just let you get your water first.
Thank you.
Your address
Business address,
Yes.
26 Cambridge Road, Belrive, Tasmania.
and your occupation.
Company director.
Thank you. Now, at the request of Mrs. Dobson, Mitchell and Allport, did you provide some advice on the potential cause of the fire at Mel Barrett's place at 242 Whitehill Road on the 3rd of January 2013?
I did indeed.
And in the course of responding to requests from Messrs Dobson, Mitchell and Allport, did you prepare reports of the 17th December 2018, the 10th of July 2020 and the 12th of February 2021?
I did indeed.
Could those although those reports are numbered 19, 20 and 21, I tender those.
Thank you.
And at document sorry, I'm being challenged by the size of the font at the moment, Your Honour. My apologies.
There's an accessibility setting.
Yes, there is.
For people who can't see very well, like me.
I'm looking for some training certificates for Mr. Thomas, and not where I expected them to be. Here we go. Document 96. Could that please be brought up? Now, can we scroll through these certificates, please, Mr. Thomas, and can you identify each of them and the relevance that any may have in respect to investigation of bushfire cause? Just go to the first one, please, Mr. Tempone, and we'll take them one by one. Thank you.
Yes, that course certainly had a component in regard to bush or wildfire investigation.
Yes.
I can't recall on this certificate whether bushfire investigation was involved in that or not.
That's the certificate from July 92.
Correct.
Thank you. Next one, please. The certificate from July 94.
I can't recall.
Can't recall. Thank you. The next one, October 1994.
Yes, that entire course related to grass, scrub and forest fires, as the certificate says. I was actually instrumental in establishing that course and ensuring the course occurred, and also gave some of the lectures on that course.
Right. And those lectures related, did they, to fire origin and cause determination?
Not so much so far as grass, scrub and forest fires are concerned. It was really fire science and fire behaviour, as I recall.
And what do those terms mean?
How fire might behave in particular circumstances and what might influence the behaviour of a fire.
In grass, scrub and forest areas, or more generally?
More generally.
Including grass, scrub and forest areas?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, just hold it there for a moment, please. Mr. Incole is the Chief Fire Officer and Mr. Fabian Crowe is recorded as the instructor. Do you know those gentlemen?
I don't know Mr. Incole, I know Fabian Crowe.
Right. Have you been to other courses conducted by Fabian Crowe?
I'm not sure whether I have or not.
Thank you. Yes, continue, please. Now we're at the forensic science course from October 95. Did that have any component in relation to wildfire cause?
I can't recall. I'm sorry.
We move on, please. And now one from July 96, the same question.
Again, I can't recall specifically.
Right. And I think we're at the end. Thank you very much. Now, in your report, so I tender those, Your Honour, if I hadn't already.
It's a single document.
It is, yes. Thank you, Your Honour. You have provided a CV in this matter.
Correct.
And if we can look, please, at document 20. And we could go to the author's credentials on the next page. If you could read that, please. No, don't read it out. Read it to yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Familiar with it?
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
Right. And down to point 1.8, you're content that all of that is correct?
Absolutely, yes.
As indeed you're correct that each of you, as indeed you're satisfied that each of your 3 reports are true and correct?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Now, could we please go to document 19. And you'll see that this is your first report, and you have detailed there your fire scene examination. Now, first of all, if we go back to the first page, the dates, sorry, on the second page, are the dates set out there, attendance at scene, are they correct?
That was my initial attendance at the scene on the 20th of August 2013.
Right. And this report deals with attendances for an examination of the scene.
That is correct, yes.
Right. And you have said that your initial fire scene examination commenced on the outer perimeter of the determined fire origin as detailed by the Tasmania Fire Service report.
Correct.
Right. Now, when you conducted that fire scene examination, you had with you, I suggest, 2 things. First of all, the Tasmania Fire Service report.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, and just to make sure that we can identify that, if document 24 could be brought up, please. And if you could scroll through that, please, Mr. Tempone, so that the witness can satisfy himself that this is the document that he had with him on this investigation.
Yes, that is correct. That is the document that I had with me.
Thank you. Now, the second thing that I suggest you had with you was your skill as a fire scene examiner.
I would hope so.
Right. Now, as to the Tasmania Fire Service report, did you read that before going on site?
I did.
And you understood the conclusion that had been reached by its author?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to find the area that included the old stump and that area of origin referred to in that report?
Yes, the photographs of the Tas Fire Service report were most helpful in that regard.
Right, thank you. Now, 3.1 of, if we can, yes, if we can revert to the to document 19, please. You've said at 3.1, my initial fire scene examination, and I'll put a D in there, commenced on the outer perimeter of the determined area of fire origin as determined in the Tasmania Fire Service report. Could the witness please be shown document 101, photo 68. Now, you recognise what's shown in that aerial photograph?
Yes, I do. Ms Barrett's house and the cleared area at the top of the little ridge that the house was positioned on.
Right. Now, Mr Thomas, sitting opposite you is Mr Tempone, who is able to move a cursor at your direction. You'll see that he's currently got it sitting on top of the house.
Mm-hmm.
I would like you, please, to take that cursor, ask Mr Tempone to move the cursor to the point where you commenced your initial fire scene examination, and take him on that journey that you went on this day.
Yes, on this day, the 20th of August, I commenced on the road to the left of the photograph, not the circular road, the straighter road. No, further back,
yes.
back further, back across to the right, yeah, around that area there,
Yes.
and down the road and across.
Right, now can you just take the cursor with you, please, Mr Thomas, and watch as Mr Tempone follows you. If you use terms like go straight, go to the right, it'll be much easier rather than saying going over there.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if we progress directly down the road
If you can draw a line, Mr Tempone, as we go. Well, sorry, we need a
to
screenshot
the
first.
west,
That involves taking a screenshot,
Yes.
and the cursor becomes much less visible. Could I suggest that it might be a good idea just to get Mr Thomas to explain first, and,
Yes.
then take a screenshot and repeat it?
Yes, thank you. Yes, you're content with that, Mr Thomas?
I am.
Thank you.
Yes. So if we progress with the cursor in a westerly direction down the road, so the straight road, I'm sorry. Yes, down, continue on, continue.
Just stop for a moment. You said they're a westerly direction. Are you content?
Oh, sorry, easterly direction. The
Right, thank
cursor's pointing in a westerly direction.
Yes.
Coming from a westerly direction.
Yep.
Yeah, easterly direction, obviously.
Yes.
And around in a semicircle, a little further down, if you could, please, and around in the semicircle.
Which way, Mr Thomas?
To the right.
Thank you.
Across a little further, across a little further, across a little further, across a little further, across a little further. Now back in a westerly direction towards the house. Along that dirt track, correct, a little to the right, if you could, please. A little to the right, yes, back along to the house.
Yes. And that was that's your outer perimeter walk?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if we could screenshot, please, and capture that. Thank you. That could be tendered. What were you looking for on that walk?
Any indicators which might assist me in the origins of the fire, anything that might be out of the normal. Sometimes when you're conducting an investigation, you don't really know what you're looking for until you see it, and then it makes sense to you or has a relevance to you. But just anything that might have assisted with determining what might have happened in this instance.
Now, leaving aside what you'd seen in the TFS photographs in the report, did you see anything that was of assistance in relation to fire travel?
Objection, Your Honour.
Yes, Mr. Armstrong.
Your Honour, we had been told that Mr. Thomas was being called as an expert. None of this is in his reports. Now, it should have been, with great respect. Many months ago. I'm hearing this for the first time. I object to it.
Well, because it's not proof doesn't mean it's not admissible.
Well, it does go to, if my learned friend is going to try to lead from Mr. Thomas some opinion as to whether the TFS got the area of origin right, then firstly, that should have been in Mr. Thomas's reports. Secondly, its absence from those reports would mean that the report or any opinion he expresses in that regard would fail to disclose the basis for his conclusions, and it would therefore be objectionable as to its admissibility.
Yes, well, I understand that. Let me say two things. Firstly, in respect of Mr. Thomas's reports and some others that are to come, there are matters that are going into evidence by consent because they're in the court book. But I need to say that I wouldn't place any reliance on any opinion that does not have a demonstrated factual basis, in Mr. Thomas's case, either in his own expressed observations or in other evidence that's actually tendered on the trial. Now, if there is to be an objection to material that is not proofed, then the agreement as to the court book tender doesn't extend to that, and it may be objected to on the basis that no factual basis has been established in the evidence. And if that's the nature of your objection, then Mr. Reid needs to respond to it and lead that evidence first. Now, that's not a final position. I'm just expressing my views about this.
I understand, Your Honour. I guess, Your Honour, we're therefore in Your Honour's hands as to whether, and Mr. Reid's hands as to whether he wishes to lead evidence for the first time from Mr. Thomas about this investigation. And if Your Honour is minded to receive it, then I'll need to hear it and then decide when I can deal with it.
Well, then what I need to do is, and can do, is to take this evidence de bene esse,
Yes.
and then hear your objection to its inadmissibility based on the lack of factual foundation at the end of the evidence, or at some time when you've had an opportunity to consider the transcript.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Mr. Reid?
Yes, Your Honour, I don't intend to lead anything contrary to what is seen in 3.2 of the report. That is, the available burning indicators were inconsistent in assisting with any definitive fire extension from any singular point. That's what's been proved. And it's quite proper in my submission to ask what he did and what he saw.
Well, there's nothing wrong with you tendering the report because that's the agreement between council. And then to use that as the basis for submission at the conclusion of all of the evidence.
Yeah.
The danger in asking Mr. Thomas questions is that you might be taking him outside that area.
Oh.
And hence Mr. Armstrong's opinion. So you really need to do it one way or the other, it seems to me. Either tender the report and be done with it, or take him through his evidence bit by bit and run the risk that there'll be an objection to the admissibility of it.
I'll run the risk, Your Honour.
Right. Well, then you've got an objection at the moment, and the way to deal with it is for me to take Mr. Thomas's evidence. I'm sorry.
Yes.
From this point on, de bene esse, until council are agreed that it's no longer in the nature of material that's outside documents in the court book.
Yes, thank you, Your Honour.
Having said that, it's a convenient point to adjourn
Indeed.
for lunch.
Thank you, Your Honour.
I'll adjourn then.
Please sit down, please.
Till 2:15, Mr. Thompson, sorry.
This honourable court now stands adjourned until 2:15.